Hello and welcome to Just Solutions. I am your host, Gloria Neal. And Just Solutions, if this is your first time or whether it is your 31st time, it is a show that is issues driven, right? We discuss all the issues of the day. I like to say the issues of now, right? We're talking about it now, we're experiencing it now, we're seeing it now, we're hearing it. And so the issues of now, and not only discuss them, we come up with a variety of solutions. And it's not so much that we agree on the solutions, but we talk about here we are, where do we go? So, one of the issues that continues to make news is police brutality or police abusing power or police who are less than honest, right? I always like to say police should never make my newscast unless they are doing something good, right? If you see police these days on the news, it is because typically a black man or a black person has been beat, shot to death, misused, abused, all the thing, kicked, stomped, you name it. And it cannot be that this group of people are just the only ones that this happens to. And then nobody says, well, you know what? That's just a coincidence. Black people say, I have a problem and a challenge. And if black people have an issue, everyone should have an issue, especially during this Black History Month. So let's talk about it. I have got a guest who, oh, y'all are going to love. I have checked out some of their stuff on One Hood Media and I have fallen in love with it, not because it's perfect, but because it's raw, it's real, and it's where we live in today's society, putting it out there and telling it like it is. My guest is the founder or co-founder and CEO of One Hood Media. His name is Jasiri X. And Jasiri, I want to welcome you to Just Solutions. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be on with you. And, like you said, I mean, if there's one thing we need a solution to right now as a community, it's around policing and how we can get, equitable, just and fair treatment from police when we interact with police.
Absolutely. So the question that comes to my mind is, do you believe that police reform is the answer?
Well, I think if you look at what happened with Tyree Nichols, I mean, you would have to say no, police reform isn't the answer because, all of the things that people were talking about police reform were present, right? People said, oh, we need more black cops. Well, it was 5 black cops that, led the brutal beating of Tyree Nichols. They had body cameras, although their body cameras were on, there were cameras that caught what happened. They use quote unquote less lethal weapons where you talk about, tasers instead of guns, right? All of these things. So, these were the things that were pushed in terms of police reforms for us in our community, but none of them saved the life of Tyree Nichols. And so I think at this point, we were part of a group of communities that were talking about defunding the police. And that was, it was almost like we're using profanity, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Just using that terminology and that language. But what we were saying was that to really provide safer communities, if you look at the safest communities across the country, they're not communities that have the most police. Oftentimes, the safest communities don't even have police departments there, right? What do they have? They have resources. They have resources for the young people in their community. They have resources for the adults that live there. And it's those resources that make communities safe, not the presence of somebody that has a gun or a badge or a taser, right? That's right. What makes communities safer. And that's what we were saying. We were saying we want real investments in our community, not technology that has been, disproven to even work around crime, right? But we want real investments in our schools, real investments in our infrastructure, jobs, employment. These are the things that makes communities safe.
Absolutely. And when you talk about, Jasiri, you talk about looking at that video and knowing it and seeing it, right? And you think the difference between being policed or policing and having access to police, two different things. And you're right, we do see it on film. But let me ask you something. As a black man and me being a black woman, that was black on black crime at its worst. There was another component here I've heard people criticize and say, "Oh, well, Black Lives Matter wasn't protesting out on that because it was the black cops." And I said to this person, "Don't think that there is not an issue. It is police brutality, period, regardless of who it is, right? They could have been Latino for all I care, but the problem
Right.
is." You being black men still seem to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to being treated fairly and justly and like a human. So what do you say? How did it make you feel when you saw 5 black faces pop up there? And there could be more, who were charged when it came to the beating of Tyree Nichols.
Well, I mean, it's something kind of too familiar as well. I mean, most of the negative interactions that I've had, unfortunately, with police, oftentimes it's other Black police officers. And, this is why when we would have conversations with people that were talking about police reform, I would always say there's no data that shows that the presence of Black police officers leads to less violence and that police violence. There's no data that shows that. And so, but it's interesting that kind of like the critics were saying like, oh, but these are Black officers. And then, people were like, well, I thought they were blue. I thought police were blue lives, right? Now it's a Black man. And even these Black officers, I mean, we saw 5 Black officers, fired and arrested, but it took like, Twitter detectives to find the presence of a white officer that also tased Tyree, that talked about that was encouraging the police to beat Tyree. And it was only the presence of folks on Twitter that led to that officer being fired. But for all we know, he hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been charged. And so even that functions differently, So hopefully this is also another message to Black people that want to carry the water for white supremacy. That was another thing when we were saying this was white supremacy and people were saying, well, how can this be white supremacy if these were Black officers? Yeah. And somebody on Twitter made a comment that said, well, when my Black self is making a taco, that doesn't mean that's no longer Mexican food. And so to me, I hope this is a lesson to these Black officers that are often finding themselves participating in kind of these white supremacist ideologies when it comes to how you police and treat people of your own community. And I think another thing too is, remember, this was one of those specialized units that we've seen all over the country, overreaching, right? We don't see Scorpion units or stress units or these units. We don't see them in Beverly Hills. We don't see them in these wealthy white communities. And by all accounts, Tyree he didn't even break the law. And so here are these hyper aggressive units that they create to over police us, to be all in our face, to pull us over and harass us for nothing. And it's those small instances of traffic stop that oftentimes leads to people losing their life for what? For a simple ticket. And so I think all of those things show the way we're policed, whether it be by, like you said, Black, white, or Latino. It's the way in which our communities are policed that goes all the way back to slave times.
No question.
Which is tied to the origin of the police. That has to change.
Correct.
And so if I can say one more thing, we in Pittsburgh, One Hood is a part of a coalition to reimagine public safety. And that was one of the things that we talked about in this report is we want to decenter police from the lives of Black people. If we can just have less police in our face and less interaction, it's going to lead to less violence. In Pittsburgh, we actually were able to work with City Council to pass a law that prevented the police from doing low-level traffic stops on our community. In Pittsburgh in 2020, 12% of the entire Black male population was stopped by the police. If you're a Black man, you're more than 12 times more likely to be pulled over by police. These are stats that came in 2020. So recently, and it made national news, the chief of the Pittsburgh police said that they were going to enforce that law anyway to boost police officer morale. And again, it's like, why would you do something if your design or your job is to enforce the law? well, the law says that you're not to do this anymore.
Right.
Go do so. But they're so used to profiling and harassing our community as a police tactic that when we were able to change the law, it's like they didn't even know what to do with themselves. Yeah. And so part of what we have to do going forward is change the way you interact as a police department and a force in our community. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us are foots on the ground. We have to take the initiative. Right.
Jasiri, how many times have you been surprised that people do not even know the origin of police, how they come about?
I mean, I think it is surprising, but I mean, it's sad. I mean, unfortunately, that gets into our education system, and to be honest, for many people that are not Black, you don't have to get to, because the police function as, for white people, the police function as an extension of, furthering white supremacy, so they don't have to oftentimes worry about the police. If the police break up the white party that are high school students, they're sending them back home. Oh, that's so-and-so's son. Oh, let them go do their thing. So they didn't have to. What's interesting is, modern policing, a lot of people don't know, started in Pittsburgh, where I am. Yeah. In Pittsburgh, for those that don't know, is Fraternal Order of Police Lodge number 1. And so this is part of the reason why Pittsburgh traditionally has some of the highest paid police officers, but also we have an extensive, very long history of police violence against our community. Right. And so in this report that we put together, we kind of said, there are 2 things that actually started in Pittsburgh. One was the history of modern policing, but the other thing was the history of the modern EMS started in Pittsburgh, and it started with a Black organization, mm-hmm. a Black neighborhood in Pittsburgh, the Hill District, called Freedom House. And the reason Freedom House started to, come and do what we now know as like the ambulance and EMS is because mm-hmm. those entities wouldn't come into the Black community. And then it became the police officer's responsibility to take Black people to the hospital, and they would not do that.
Right.
So we created this system, and Freedom House became the blueprint for what people see as modern EMS now. And we put that in a report to say that we as a community, if you leave us alone or if you give us the resources, we can find solutions on our own, right? Mm-hmm. We don't need more. We don't need thousands more police or thousands more cars. We don't need a technology like ShotSpotter, which data has proven does not really even work to stop, things happening in our community.
Well, if ShotSpotter is working, it means that the shots have already been fired, so it's not working.
100%. So, but that's what, when people say like community investment in our community, oftentimes those millions of dollars are only into policing, and it's not into actually building up the infrastructure of our community. So what we're saying is, instead of spending another 150, so for instance, in Pittsburgh, we spent $50 million more over the last 5 years, but crime is still up. So obviously it's not just more millions. That's the weird thing about policing. It's like when policing fails, they get more money.
Exactly.
It's right. More crime, we need more money to policing. It's a weird thing. And it's like, no, why not invest that in community organizations that are on the ground in these communities doing so much with so little every day? And why not invest it into the infrastructure of the places where we live?
Okay, so let me flip the script on you, because you start thinking about police and you think about individuals who call 911 when they are victims of crime, when they do see something that needs a higher authority. Everyone is not equipped, and a lot of people who do have guns are ill-equipped to shoot them, to handle them, to even know how to use a firearm. So then if you talk about policing ourselves, is that really reality? Because you have people who are nowhere near as responsible as you and I, and it has nothing to do with melanated skin. It just has to do with being left to our own devices. That may not be the answer either. What do you say?
So I think it goes into, again, a lot of people don't know the data around what police actually do. And so, because, we're watching CIS and we're watching NCIS and whatever, Law and Order. And what we don't understand is 80 to 85% of police time is on misdemeanors. That when it comes to like homicides, 0.01% of police time, and this is a national study, right? Is spent on homicides. Like and then when you get into the data around homicides that actually somebody actually gets indicted for and actually go to trial and actually gets convicted for, it's even less. So most of police time is not spent on, the detective come in and he's, finding all of the clues and putting the case together. That is very, very rare. Most police time is spent around misdemeanors. And most of the times you're finding also police being put in situations where they're mishandling mental health crises, right? If you saw what happened in LA with the teacher that was just killed, I saw a man going through a mental health crisis. And so in places like Denver, where you are, right? They started the STAR program.
Absolutely.
And awesome. The STAR program started to send mental health people out on these mental health calls.
Right.
And they didn't, like the first 2,500 calls they went out on, not once did they have to call any police backup. And none of those people that were dealing with mental health crisis were needed to be arrested.
Correct.
And so now they're expanding that program. We're hoping to come we're hoping to come to Denver to look at how that program is working. We're going to different places. So here's something that they did in Newark, New Jersey, right? They created an office called the Office of Violence Prevention. And basically this office sits in between the police and the community. And office is staffed by, like you said, everybody don't know, but we have trusted community folks that have been on the ground that have broke up more beef than any other police. Right. So they put two incredible Black women in charge of this office. They took 5% of the police budget and invested in the Office of Violence Prevention, took over a police department building that was no longer in use, and they actually reduced crime and murder in the city of Newark. Because what did they do? They invested in community folks. They invested in trauma care, health care, mental health resources, job resources for folks. And they gave folks a choice. Hey, you can get this job help. You can get this mental help. You can get, service and tie with community. Or if you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to be arrested and go to jail, right? But they were able to invest in community people that the community trusted, knew, and believed in. And what happened? Crime went down. And so we're actually going to Newark on Monday to look at what Newark did, how they did it, and can we bring this same model back to Pittsburgh to help reduce crime where we are. So no, everybody, and again, grandma, something happens, she want to call 911, like that's 100% understandable. Right. Unfortunately, but then you start getting into response times. And what a response time look when our community calls versus other community calls, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, if we judge police on that, like if we judge them on clearance rates around murders, around rapes, go find your police department's clearance rates and how bad they are, and then ask yourself if this is something that we need to put hundreds more $1 million in. It's not.
Yeah, it's not a money issue. I think in many ways it has a lot to do with community and community resources, and even something as simple as requiring those officers to live in the communities that they are supposed to be servicing. I think that.
Hey, Gloria, let me tell you this. In Pittsburgh, that used to be the rule. It was in the charter that you had to live in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Police Department, the FOP, Fraternal Order Police Lodge Number 1, sued the city of Pittsburgh to prevent their officers from having to live in Pittsburgh. And you know what they said? They said the reason they didn't want their officers to live in Pittsburgh because it was too dangerous. But you're the police.
Oh my
God! People that's supposed to be making the city a safe place to live, and you don't even want to be there. This is the crazy hypocrisy that we see every day, and this is why I saw a figure recently. It said 89%. This is a national figure. 89% of people across the country want police reform. 89%. And so this is why, we're involved politically. Yeah, we do media, we do arts and activism, because we have to start putting the pressure on these politicians to say, no, you have to lead police reform. We don't want people that are beholden to a police. We want people to lead on this issue. And if 90% of us across whatever partisan lines want to see some police reform, at some point, this got to change.
No question. And I was talking to an individual who was in law enforcement. He still is in law enforcement. And I said, there are 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. If each one of them just had just one bad apple, and we know that there are many more, but if they had just one bad apple, that's too many, right?
Right.
If you look at where we are, because people say, most of them are, they're fair, good. I'm not arguing that. But if it's not the bad ones, it is the good ones who are not doing anything to stop the bad ones.
100%.
That's the issue, right? And so all of this feeds in when they say most of us just want to go home and we want to do our job. That's fine. Part of doing your job is getting rid of the bad person. And sometimes the bad person wears blue. Hello, somebody.
Let me tell you this. So when we first started, this was a story I always tell. When we first started One Hood, and we were doing a lot of community work, the police actually contacted us and said, hey, we want to meet with One Hood. And, we talked to them like, do we want to do this? We said, they called, we'll come. So we went. Yeah. We went to the headquarters. We met with the police. And so police said, One Hood, we want you all to help people in your community cooperate more with the police. And we said, what we want from you all is we want police to testify against other officers in cases of police brutality. We're one of those cities that have a civilian police review board, but they don't have subpoena power. So no police officer in the 30-year history of the civilian police board has ever testified. We said we want you to compel officers to testify at the civilian police review board. And we said, and we want it in a binding document. They said, we can't do that. We said, okay, well, we can't help you.
Hello.
Like what? Like you want us?
Where's the reciprocity here? Exactly. You asking me for something? Yeah, that is crazy.
You tell us we should, tell on one another, but we know about the thin blue line. You don't tell on fellow. Think about Attorney Benjamin Crump saying that a law needs to be passed to make police officers stop other police officers from committing crime. That's a law that has to be passed.
Exactly.
You would think a police officer seeing another officer commit a crime would want to stop that. But we saw in the case of Tyree Nichols, we saw officers, we saw EMS, we saw everybody. And I believe everybody there, they charge us, not only that, they charge us with conspiracy. If me and you were in a car and I shot somebody and killed somebody, they would charge you
like you shot him. That's right. That's right.
Everybody needs to be charged with his murder. Everybody needs to be charged with conspiracy, because you all participated collectively in witnessing and not doing anything to stop this brother's murder. But of course, we're not going to see that. We're going to get some milquetoast, we got rid of the Scorpion unit or whatever. And that's the frustrating part. And that's why, we're involved politically in our community. That's why for us, it's about policy change, legislative change. Like, we got to be involved in all of these things.
This week in White Supremacy and FSTV, that is coming soon with you all.
Yes.
Right? Yes, that's going to be good. But so let me get back to our allies in the middle, because I don't want people listening to think, well, they're white people. We can't help, and we can't, do you hate us? And it's like, no, it's not what we're saying. At least I understand there are some allies in that space. Many of them don't know what to do. They are speaking up, but at the same time, I have also seen many of us shun them, saying, you know what, you are a part of this. I've got a friend here who was doing Race to Dinner, which is a whole group of, she brings in a group of white women into her home with two rules. One, her name is Regina Jackson, by the way. One is you cannot cry, white women, when you come in, because we're going to tell you about these racist tendencies. And two, you have to participate. You just can't sit there and listen. But what she is saying is something similar to what you were saying about police. And she's saying this complacency is a bigger issue than those who are racist, because when you see it, you clutch your pearls and pretend like it's not happening, or you don't speak out about it. Those are some of the challenges. The people who are saying, I know it's wrong, but I don't think it happens here. The difference between being nice and kind, right? Nice, you see it, but you turn away. Kind
Yeah.
is you see it, you speak on it with respect and say, hey, I'm a white person, you're a white person. Stop doing that. That is racist. And you keep on going, calling it out where it is.
100%.
There's a
And
lot to unpack.
no, you're right. And that's kind of why we wanted to start the show, is because we wanted to educate people. At the end of every show, we have, when we joke, we laugh. It's funny. Like, we want to talk to you about what's going on. We laugh, but we have what we call white pages. Every show, we introduce a book from a Black author, to say, this is something you can read if you want to learn more about it. Because like you said, like, we need everybody to be a part of this struggle to make America what it's supposed to be: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of everyone. That's going to take all of us working for real and true equity.
That's absolutely the problem and the solution. As we talk here on Just Solutions, right? I think everybody has skin in the game. And as I say, people who are sleeping or who want to sleep, or that's not my problem. It is.
And the sad reality is, like, white supremacy damages white people to a degree that sometimes they don't even know. If you look at these so-called red states, they're the states that often have the worst education, the least amount of support. Crime in rural areas is going high right now. These tax cuts that are the wealthiest 1% are benefiting from are harming regular middle class and poor people everywhere. Look, all of us struggling to buy eggs right now. You know what I'm saying? Not just Black people. You know what I'm saying? And so to me, it's like, we can find policies that work for everybody, legitimate solutions that work, because so many people are hurting across racial lines, and so many of these policies that are put in between these culture wars or these racist dog whistles are policies that negatively affect 80 to 85% of white working class Americans all over the country. And that culture stuff is meant for you to not see how the wealthiest 1% are getting richer and richer and richer and richer.
Yep. And words without action, it's kind of like faith without works. So you have said a mouthful today, brother. You are doing a phenomenal job. You and everyone at One Hood Media. I thank you so much. Jasiri X, who is the CEO and co-founder of One Hood Media, please come back on Just Solutions anytime.
Would love to.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. And thank you for joining us today. It has been, there's a lot to unpack, but we need to start unpacking it in order to move forward and stop with the stagnation, because we won't get anywhere. Nothing will change. And we'll continue to have conversations about Tyree Nichols and about George Floyd's and all of the people who are dying and leaving this earth, or as I like to say, showing up in heaven way too early. Way too early. So thank you for joining in today. I'm your host, Gloria Neal. Until next week, this is Just Solutions.